Hey, Ben, did you hear? Richard Saunders is on his 750th episode of the Skeptic Zone.
What? Seriously? That's a huge number. On Squaring in the Strange, we haven't even cracked 200. What does he have that we don't have?
Brains and talent?
Well, yeah, obviously. But what else?
A dreamy Aussie accent.
Well, okay, but what else? What's his secret ingredient? Wait, I know. His show has 2 producers, right? We only have 1.
Are you talking about his cats?
Maybe we can hire them away.
Yeah, we'll offer them canned tuna. I bet they're getting tired of eating Vegemite over there. Then we will have his secret podcasting weapon, and he'll be ruined! Ruined!
Well, until then, happy 750th, Richard.
And Maud and Henrietta.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 750. Thank you, pre-recorded crowd, for the 19th of February, 2023. And thank you to Celestia Ward and Ben Radford from Squaring the Strange for kicking off this week's show. And a big shout out to their co-host, Pasco Romero, as well. Coming up on episode 750, we have more well-wishing messages from various skeptical friends from around the planet. But also we speak to Brian Dunning about his latest documentary, the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. But really, it's about the process of making a documentary and one of the dangers, which I didn't know about, hypothermia. Wow, Brian really suffers for his art, suffers for science, and you'll find out the dangers of hypothermia and what happened to Brian coming up at the top of the show. After that, it's a very heartfelt tribute to our dear friend, the late Dr. Harriet Hall, and this is by Susan Gerbic, and it was originally published in the Skeptical Inquirer online, but Susan will read this tribute to Harriet Hall. Then it's the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham, and Tim looks at delusions, in the segment called What Goes Around. And of course, the skeptical community often has to deal with people we consider have delusions about this, that, or the other. Then to round off the show, it's a dive back into the Trove archives where we look at references to the Canberra Skeptics over the years, especially in the early days, in the 1980s. And if you look at this week's show notes, you'll notice that 10 years ago, on episode 226, we interview our former reporter, Dr Krissy Wilson, Maynard Spooky Action at Skeptics in the Pub in Newcastle for Science and Beer, and we chat to Paul Willis. Dr. Paul Willis then, Professor Paul Willis now. Yes, episode number 750. Before we start, a big thank you to my current reporters and all the past reporters going back 16 years or so. And who knows, we may even get another visit from the Skeptical Fairy today. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have my favorite snack while I'm here in the United States, which is a mixture of jalapeno flakes, you can buy at Trader Joe's, and peanuts. While I do that, I hope you enjoy episode 750 of The Skeptic Zone.
This is Richard Saunders from the Skeptic Zone podcast. I'm in Bend, Oregon, visiting my old buddy Brian Dunning from Skepoid. Brian, good to see you again.
Hey, good to be here. What do you mean, good to be here? I'm always here. Good to have you here, sir.
Thank you very much. I wanted to catch up with you because just to give our listeners one more update as to the new documentary, the UFO movie. They don't want you to see it. Must be on the home stretch by now.
I am more than 50% through with the editing. I anticipate being done with that in about 3 weeks, and then it's going to go for about a month for color, sound, and scoring.
I can't wait. I'm lucky enough, Brian's going to show me some rushes, some early shots a bit later on. I'm looking forward to that. But I wanted to talk to you about one of the dangers of filmmaking, which happened to you firsthand. It doesn't happen to every filmmaker. It's never happened to me. But you suffered from a case of, and this is really suffering for science, a case of hypothermia.
Yep.
What's the story behind that?
So for the longest scene in the film is I narrate the entire thing beginning to end from a set piece, which we have out in the desert in Owens Valley, California, basically the desert of the western United States. And the idea was that we were going to start just after sunset, go through the night, and then finish with sunrise. So it kind of brings the whole story full circle. Now, most of the movie is the interviews and the cutaways and the other things that we do, but this narration by me is the consistent part. So we did this in January, and it's in the desert and in winter because we're not upside down like Australia. I know the temperatures can get pretty cold. So we checked it out, and the temperatures were about 10 to 15 degrees warmer than they were here in Bend, Oregon, where I live, so I was used to it. But nevertheless, I can go outside for 15 minutes here and I'm fine, but when you're outside for 6 hours, that's a bit of a difference. And my wardrobe was, I've got a hoodie that has the science is better than pseudoscience, little ghost in the rocket logo on it. And that's it. No hat, no big parka, no hood or anything. So I wanted to stay in my normal wardrobe if I could. So the plan was we broke the script up into a bunch of different segments. And each one of these segments was separate on the teleprompter. And the idea was that between each one of the segments, we could take some warm-up time. So we came very well prepared. We had a warming hut, which was in the form of a Tesla set to camp mode at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. What's that in Australian terms?
It sounds nice and warm to me. I'd have to do the translation. Listeners might know.
Well, it's nice and warm. I got these...
2022, something like that.
Okay. I got these long underwear that were very thick. They were like Navy SEAL long underwear. Like that thick, all fleecy and fuzzy and everything. I put them under my clothes. I was like the Michelin Man. I could barely move. And I had hot packs all over my body. I had about 1,000 of them down my legs, in my shirt, in my underwear, all around, everywhere. And a bunch more. The hoodie has a pocket like this. So I had them in there too. So whenever we weren't filming, I could put my hands in there, warm my hands, take them out, put them on my face, warm up my face. And I think we did everything you can reasonably do to be warm. So I had the warming hut right there, because we're only feet from the car. We're not that far from the car. And the car is only 5 minutes, it was 20 minutes from our house. We had an Airbnb in Bishop, California, which is a beautiful house, lots of fun. So I thought we were pretty well covered. But after the first few hours, we shot 4 of 6 segments, and I began slurring my speech. I was talking very slow, and if you watch the footage back, it's like this, and it's like, that's not going to work. But I didn't notice that at the time because I was inside that brain that was doing that, so I couldn't tell that I was speaking slowly, but I could tell that I couldn't enunciate words. Special relativity was the worst. I could not say special relativity. I can barely say it now. But that was because we came to a segment where I had to say that a lot, and I just couldn't do it. And we're doing all these retakes, and then I started shuddering, and I couldn't stop shuddering. And I was just slowing down so much and less able to speak. And one of the guys, we had a camera guy and a sound guy, one of the guys said, "Yeah, I think you're getting hypothermia." And like later we looked up on one of our phones, symptoms of hypothermia, and I had them all. And one of them was memory loss. To this day, I don't remember getting back to the house or a lot of what happened when we finally turned the camera off and gave up shooting. Even around I know that happened, but I don't remember most of it. So I have significant memory loss about what was going on at the time. And it showed up on the film. So we had to actually abandon the shoot about 2/3 of the way through.
Well, apart from the memory loss after, or packing up, do you remember, is it like a cold taking you over? Do you feel chilled to the bone? How do you feel?
I didn't feel that cold. My body was warm. My head was very cold. My face was numb. My ears were numb. And in fact, my face being cold and numb was what I attributed my inability to say special relativity. So I just thought, well, my face is numb. And so I'm holding cold packs up on my face, trying to warm up my cheeks, trying to warm up my tongue, everything, and it just made no difference. And my head was kind of just numb. I mean, by the time we stopped filming, I was, like I say, I don't really remember much of it, but I was out of it.
It's dedication to science. You've got it in spades, in truckloads of dedication to science. All right, so was there edible? There you are. Maybe I've got hypothermia. Was there any usable things from that night, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So we had 6 segments to shoot. 6 big segments is what I broke the script up into. We got through the first 3 are fine. Number 4 is kind of iffy. A lot of it I was speaking too slow, and there was a lot of retakes through it. So we did retakes that I was able to use, and don't tell anyone this, but for some of the segments that were just slow, I actually sped them up 5 to 10%. Speeding up the video is easy. Speeding up the audio without sounding like a chipmunk is more complicated. So we had to use more advanced audio tools to do that. But it works. It gets away with it. And then we actually, after we abandoned the shoot, we went back to the house, and I don't remember how we got back to the house. I took a hot shower, and then all of a sudden I found myself on the bed waking up. And I'm going, oh my God, what happened? We've got to finish shooting. And I went and woke up the other guys, and it turned out to be about midnight by then. I would have thought it was much later, but that's all it was. I woke up the other guys and I said, we've got to finish the shoot. I don't care how we do it, but we've got to finish it somehow. And we decided to get up at 4:30 in the morning and go out and meet the sunrise. And that ended up being the sunrise that ends the movie. The timing was perfect. By the time we got up at 4:30, I was back to normal. I was 100%. And by the time we finished that morning shoot, segments 5 and 6, when we finished segment 6, I started experimenting, trying to say special relativity. And it was already, it was happening again. So I was really glad that we were done. We got back in the car, and in that morning shoot, they made sure that I stayed in the car too. I was not allowed to be out of the car unless the camera was actually rolling. So the warming hut and the heaters, and we had warm bottles of water in there and everything. And I think we were very well prepared. Just apparently not as well as we would have needed to be.
Well, that was a close call because it is a dangerous thing. I mean, hypothermia is, I don't know, is there any long-lasting effects, or you're okay?
So I did have to read about that, and it turns out there are long-lasting effects. Hypothermia and hyperthermia, they're actually brain injuries. And once you have one, you are more susceptible to get it in the future. So I'm actually more susceptible to hypothermia in the future. And so I'm going to be more careful in the future.
So you should be. So be that as it may, you're on the, as we said before, you're on the home stretch with the documentary. Have you got a proposed finished date in mind?
Not specifically. I mean, the dates that I have are approximate. It's going to be about another 3 weeks of editing, and then about a month of the color and the sound and the scoring are all 3 different professionals who have their different schedules. So I can't really speak for them, but that's approximately the time frame we're looking at.
So we're looking, hopefully, the middle of the year, maybe towards the end of the year.
This is February. Give it 2 months. I think by the beginning of May, it definitely should be finished by then. I'll be shocked if it's not.
All right, that's something to look forward to. So, Brian, a pleasure to see you as always, and thanks for the lovely lunch we're about to eat, and my drink, and taking me to this wonderful place here in Bend. Where are we exactly?
This is 10 Barrel West, one of the breweries in Bend, Oregon. This is one of their 2 locations here in town, and it's good. It's always good, but all the places in Bend are always good. So,
well, thank you, folks. This is Richard Saunders and Brian Dunning signing off from Bend, Oregon.
Hi, this is Brian Dunning from the Skepoid Podcast, wishing Richard Saunders and the team at the Skeptic Zone a happy 750th episode.
Hey, Adrian.
Hi, Susan. Out for some shopping, eh?
Yep, I'm stocking up on this imitation maple syrup from Australia.
Imitation? Imitation? No. You need to buy the real thing from Canada.
But I saw the TV commercial, and it said that noted pancake-eating expert Richard Saunders says it's the best maple syrup money can buy, and 60% of people preferred it in a blind taste test. Everyone knows it's the best.
Oh, come on, Susan. You know better than that. That's the argument from authority.
It is?
Or is it the argument from popularity? It might be another logical fallacy. I'm not sure.
Really? If only we had a way of finding out.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my, it's the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet.
Yes, that's right. But how did you know who I am?
I listened to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Also, didn't you used to be the tooth fairy?
Oh, yes. I remember you. I'll never forget your left upper lateral incisor. Would you like it back?
No, it's okay. You keep it.
Hey, skeptical fairy godmother angel. What are you doing here in the supermarket?
I've come to tell you that you can find out about 40 different logical fallacies on YouTube in one handy location. Listen to each one to hear an explanation and examples of how they might be used.
Oh.
Just go to tinyurl.com/logicalzone and you'll find all the logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma with handy time codes to get to the exact one you want.
Who is Michelle Bickersma?
Oh, just a friend of mine.
tinyurl.com/logicalzone. Thank you, skeptical fairy godmother angel. I guess you'll disappear in a puff of smoke and thunder now, eh?
Not quite yet. I have a bit of shopping to do. Susan?
Yes?
Where do I find the Australian maple syrup?
What? No. Come with me, so-called skeptical fairy. This is real maple syrup from Canada. Made with real maple.
I think we need to think. Here's Susan Gerbic.
Hello, everyone. This is Susan Gerbic. Richard has asked me to read an article that I have written about Harriet Hall, the Skepdoc, and in tribute to her. It published in Skeptical Inquirer magazine, online, January 27th, 2023. Harriet A. Hall was born in St. Louis, Missouri on July 2nd, 1945, and died on January 11th, 2023, in her home in Washington. Richard Saunders just replayed on his podcast, The Skeptic Zone, a 2007 interview he had done with Harriet Hall when they were both on a J-Riff cruise to Alaska. It was Harriet's first ever podcast interview ever, and re-listening to it today made me pause and consider how much she gave to our community and how fortunate we are to have had her with us for as long as we did. She explained to Richard that for many years she had been a passive skeptic, attending the conferences and doing the readings, but never expecting to be more active than that. But then she attended the CSI Skeptics Toolbox held at the University of Eugene, led by Ray Hyman, Barry Beierstein, Wally Sampson, James Alcott, Lauren Pankras, and with his amazing optical illusions in tow, Jerry Andrus. Harriet told Richard that it was at the Toolbox that she realized she had found her community, and with some encouragement from the Toolbox faculty, tried her hand at writing an article on medical quackery. One thing led to another, and she became prolific, publishing in Skeptical Inquirer and Skeptic, as well as a short stint for one of Oprah's magazines. She then went on to write for Science-Based Medicine. She started a writing career later in life, but made up for it with her productivity. I met her at one of the Skeptic Toolbox events. I was also a passive skeptic, just hanging out, waiting to see where I fit in the wild world of scientific skepticism. I'd never ever thought in my wildest dreams that I would also become a writer for Skeptical Inquirer, and in some far out year of 2023 would be asked to write Harriet's obituary for that publication. I think Harriet would have called both our careers surreal. But within this community, we both learned that all hands were needed on deck. We need all skills and all motivations. All hopes of slowing down need to be forgotten. There was work to be done, and Harriet stepped up. Even after a career in the United States Air Force as a flight surgeon, retiring as a colonel, even after receiving her pilot's license, she kept on stepping up. Harriet had never published anything before, but her quick wit and snarky responses in print had editors seeking her out to write more. In 2008, she wrote Women Aren't Supposed to Fly, the memoirs of a female flight surgeon, about her military life from 1969 to 1989 and her experiences living in Spain. I know people thought of her as a feminist, but I'm not sure she would have thought of herself that way. We had conversations about the pressure she felt to be the female trend setter in the skeptic community. It wasn't a role she wanted pushed on her. Harriet was clear. She wanted just to be Harriet Hall, the Skepdoc. In an email exchange I had with Harriet a couple years ago, we both were added to one of those females of skepticism lists. And I was expressing my frustration at feeling like I was being placated, not good enough to be with the men. Harriet wrote me back, I agree with you. I hope someday people will not even notice sex or gender, but just recognize ability and accomplishments. And Harriet did step up, over and over for our community. You might not be aware of how prolific she was. She became a fellow for the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, as well as receiving a fellowship for the German skeptics group GWUP. She was a founding member of the Institute for Science and Medicine, and in 2015 published a series of videos for the James Randi Educational Foundation titled Science-Based Medicine, in which she attacked homeopathy, acupuncture, chiropractic, and more. That series of 10 videos is almost 100,000 views. And personally, I think it should be more like 100 million views. She gave the Australian skeptics unlimited access to her published personal work, so I'm sure they will be used to continue to educate. Harriet's frankness and pithy humor comes through in her videos and her writings. The GSOW project that I run often uses articles that she had written for the appropriate Wikipedia pages. In preparation for this article, I revisited some of the quotes we had left for others to find. On the colon cleansing Wikipedia page, we quote her saying, "The colon cleanses itself. The idea that the walls are coated with years-old hamburger residue is preposterous." On the Christiane Northrup Wikipedia page, we added this quote, "MDs who recommend quackery along with legitimate medical advice are arguably more dangerous than outright quacks because people are more likely to take them seriously." She gave the Netflix series Unwell 2 thumbs down, and What the Health, another faux health documentary series, not a reliable source of scientific information. Her own local newspaper, the News Tribune's Wikipedia page, got a piece of her mind when we added, "Harriet Hall criticized the News Tribune and Skeptical Inquirer in 2019 for its acceptance of advertisements for health-related products that intimated the presentation of real articles with only a small disclaimer." And you might think it's no big deal because we all know these are faux health shows and they're full of misinformation. But what you might not understand is that when these documentaries first came out and someone created the Wikipedia pages, there was no notable criticism to be found. Only fluffy positive articles existed. So the public that was clamoring to understand if what they were just watching was science, real science, or had gotten, they only got nothing but positive nonsense to find. And Harriet stepped up. She watched the shows and got her reviews out as fast as she could for the readers to find and learn that they were being conned with slick, fast-talking quacks. After I asked her to watch one series and write a review, I received this email from Harriet. It was a truly painful experience, sitting through hours of nonsense because I had to keep pausing it to take 6 pages of notes, laboriously organizing my notes into an article, fact-checking, and etc. 2 days of my life gone. You owe me one. And that was Harriet, always stepping up to do what she could to help out. And with her unique humor, possibly you don't even know how funny she could be. I have a photograph of her from the 2013 CFI Summit where she dressed up as a quackbuster. She wore a spray bottle around her neck with a label that said, "Quack be gone." In 2016, she attended the Psychon Halloween party wearing a sign that simply said, oh my gosh, I can't say this word. You know what it is. Starts with an O. It's really long. She said, "This is a homeopathic flu remedy made of duck liver. They dilute it until there's nothing left but the quack. After that, she would pull out a duck call and blow it." For someone who first appeared so quiet and respectful, Harriet sure liked to tell jokes. She was quiet, so you had to sit right next to her and pay attention to her. The only one I can clearly remember was the one where the guy asked his doctor if he'd be able to play the violin after surgery. When the doctor said, "Of course," the patient said, "Well, that'll be great because I can't play it now." I know, bad joke, but we all loved hearing her tell them. She became known for the phrase tooth fairy science, meaning that some people try to study a phenomenon before knowing whether it exists. In 2022, Harriet published the book, "There's No Such Thing as a Tooth Fairy," about a little girl named Harriet who was trying to convince her younger brother, Henry, that the tooth fairy was all made up. It is a charming story beautifully illustrated by Kevin Howell. I wrote to her soon after it came out, and I told her that the community needs to find more Harriets. For all that humor, Harriet was a realist. She loved to travel, but after she slipped on a hike while attending the 2016 Australian Skeptics Conference and was hospitalized for what seemed like weeks, she slowed down. After suffering from congestive heart failure for years, she wrote to tell me that she would be staying close to home and concentrating on her writing. Back in 2012, Harriet wore a yellow t-shirt to the amazing meeting that was so controversial it was removed from her Wikipedia page after the photograph I took was uploaded. I know she wouldn't want to be remembered for the drama we lived through during those years, but I will mention what she had written on the back of that yellow t-shirt because it still encapsulates her. "I'm a skeptic. Not a skeptic, not a woman skeptic, just a skeptic." And I hear you, Harriet, and I agree. You have set a standard of productivity, quirkiness, frankness that represents all of us, and not just the females in the community. We all need to model your behavior and step up, because we're all needed to fill the void you leave us. Harriet's husband shared an email explaining that she had skipped dinner that final Wednesday night and had been feeling poorly for a few days. She told him she was cold and she was going to go to bed early. Her husband went to go check on her about 10 o'clock at night and found that she had died in her sleep. She's survived by her husband Kirk and daughters Kimberly and Kirsten Ann. There will be no formal service. She's going to be sent to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where the family has plots. I haven't yet mourned you, my friend. I'm sure I will soon. Thinking about what our community has lost, I'm looking at it like the realist you were. It's not what we lost, but how much we gained. I wish it were longer. You will live on through your writings and wisdom. Damn, I still wish you were here. I miss you already, and so say we all. Harriet, you once told me that I owe you. And as usual, you were right. But actually, we all owe you. Thank you, Harriet.
Dr. Harriet Hall, MD, known to thousands as the Skepdoc, was a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon who wrote about medicine, so-called complementary and alternative medicine, science, quackery, and critical thinking. Harriet produced a free online course of 10 video lectures on science-based medicine and alternative medicine. The videos and an accompanying course guide can be found by following the link at skepdoc.info or by visiting tinyurl.com/Skepdoc series. Topics covered in the series are science-based medicine versus evidence-based medicine, what is CAM, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy and herbal medicine, energy medicine, miscellaneous alternatives, pitfalls in research, and science-based medicine in the media and politics. Harriet covers each topic in a matter-of-fact, no-nonsense way that is sure to educate and entertain. Find it at tinyurl.com/Skepdoc series.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, my name's Tim Mendham. I'm Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics Inc. and editor of our quarterly magazine, The Skeptic. And today I'll be reading from an issue of The Skeptic from June 2019. In the section called What Goes Around, in which we start off with one idea and very cleverly link through various other things and bring us back to where we started, which is why we also call it the cycle of life. This time we're looking at deliriums, delusions, and memories. We start off with delirium of negation, and looking at Cotard's delusion, also known as walking corpse syndrome or Cotard syndrome, which is a rare mental disorder in which the affected person holds the delusional belief that they are dead. They do not exist, they are putrefying, or have lost their blood or internal organs. In 1980, the neurologist Jules Cotard described the condition as, wait for it, le délire de négation, which is the delirium of negations, pronounced badly in French, but never mind. A psychiatric syndrome of varied severity. A mild case is characterised by despair and self-loathing, that's a mild case, while a severe case is characterised by intense delusions of negation and chronic psychiatric depression. The case of Mademoiselle X describes a woman who denied the existence of parts of her body and of her need to eat. In the course of suffering the delirium of negation, Mademoiselle X died of starvation. Jules Cotard, from 1840 to 1889, he was a French neurologist who studied medicine in Paris and later went on to work as an intern at Hospice de la Salpêtrière. Pardon my French. He became particularly interested in cerebrovascular accidents, commonly known as strokes, and their consequences, and undertook autopsies to better understand how these affected the brain. In 1869, he left Salpêtrière and joined an infantry regiment as a regimental surgeon at the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War. He made particular contributions to the understanding of diabetes and delusions. In August 1889, Cotard's daughter contracted diphtheria, and he reportedly refused to leave her bedside for 15 days until she recovered. He eventually contracted diphtheria himself and died on the 19th of August. Cotard served as the real-life model for the character of Dr. Cotard in the Marcel Proust novel In Search of Lost Time. Valentin Louis Georges Eugène Marcel Proust, who lived from 1871 to 1922, was a French novelist, critic and essayist best known for his monumental novel À la recherche du temps perdu, In Search of Lost Times, earlier remembered as Remembrance of Things Past. That was published in 7 parts between 1913 and 1927. It totals about 4,000 pages, depending on the edition, and features more than 2,000 characters, which is why it's not always widely read. Proust died before he was able to complete his revision of the drafts and proofs of the final volumes, the last 3 of which were published posthumously. He is considered to be one of the most influential authors of the 20th century. À la recherche du temps perdu is also one of the least read great novels because of its length. It was referenced by American essayist and literary critic Frederick Crews in his book The Pooh Perplex, in the chapter titled À la recherche du Poupidou. The Pooh Perplex, a student casebook which came out in 1963, is presented as a group of analytical essays for use in freshman English. Each essay caricatures the methods, obsessions and style of a particular kind of critic, such as Marxist, Freudian, Christian, etc. The Poupidou essay is written by Woodbine Meadowlark. Other essays include O Felix Culpa, The Sacral Mental Meaning of Winnie the Pooh by C.J.L. Culpeper, and A Bourgeois Writer's Proletarian Fable by Martin Temporalis. All made-up names, all written by Crews. Frederick Campbell Crews, born in 1933, is Professor Emeritus of English at the University of California, Berkeley. He's the author of numerous books, including The Tragedy of Manners, moral drama in the later novels of Henry James, E.M. Foster, The Perils of Humanism, and The Sins of the Fathers, a discussion of the work of Nathaniel Hawthorne. Initially a proponent of psychoanalytic literary criticism, Crews later rejected it, becoming a critic of Sigmund Freud and his scientific and ethical standards. Crews was a prominent participant in the Freud Wars of the 1980s and 1990s, a debate over Freud's reputation, scholarship, and impact on the 20th century. Crews has published skeptical and rationalist essays on a variety of topics, including Freud and recovered memory therapy, some of which were published in The Memory Wars, Freud's Legacy in Dispute. Recovered memory therapy, RMT, is a term for psychotherapy using one or more methods for recalling memories. Proponents claim that traumatic memories can be buried in the subconscious and affect current behaviour, and that these can be recovered by RMT. It is linked to the debunked false memory syndrome and is one of various delusional disorders which include Capgras delusion, people replaced by imposters, Fragoli syndrome, different people are the same person in disguise, Munchausen syndrome, exaggerated symptoms of illness, and Cotard delusion, which brings us back to where we started. And that's from What Goes Around, from the Skeptic magazine, Volume 40, Number 2. And you can download that issue of The Skeptic for free, along with most other issues, from our website, skeptics.com.au.
Okay, zebras Orangutans. Oh.
Yes, sorry. Hi.
I'm not used to the animals talking. Who are you?
Yes, my name's Carrie Poppy. I co-host a podcast called Ona Ross and Carrie. This is my co-host Ross right here.
Okay.
We investigate spirituality, claims of the paranormal, and we were wondering if we could get on the Ark.
You did come 2 by 2. I appreciate that.
you.
Though most of the things I'm letting on the Ark don't talk.
I'm going to be talking all up on this boat. Do you mind both?
I prefer Ark or
Okay,
barge.
I'm not listening, but if you let me on, then I will make my really good podcast on your boat.
Can you
barge.
at least help clean up all the poop?
I guess I don't see why not.
Well, I'll check out the podcast. Where do I find it?
It's on MaximumFun.org.
Hey everyone, this is Abhijit from Rationable wishing Richard Saunders and the whole Skeptic Zone crew a hearty congratulations for their 750th episode. Man, this is one of the few things in life that really make me feel young. Way to go, guys. Congratulations. And hope you have many, many, many more.
Now it's time once again to dive back into those pages. We dive. I always say that. We dive. Can you imagine the scene? Diving into a digital archive of newspapers. What sound would you make? Splunk. Now it's time to dive back into those digital archives at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, full of digital newspapers, gazettes, magazines, and other journals going back decades and decades and decades, fully searchable. Now, I like to say you never know what you'll find in Trove. I say it because it's true, because I never know what I'm going to find. And looking at one search criteria can lead to another, can lead to something else, and well, on and on it goes. And I have found a reference here from 1992 to the Canberra Skeptics. The Canberra Skeptics. Let's read this report. And it's an item called Beyond the Fridge Door by Claire Tedici. And the photograph at the top has 3 men behind a desk, presumably in an outdoor area, or maybe more a booth. Canberra Skeptics from left, Drew Meek, David Vernon, and Colin Groves at the Canberra Festival last weekend. And I did at least meet Colin Groves some years ago, but he's since passed on. Battling Thieves of Thinking. And this report is in the Canberra Times, 14th of March, 1992. Canberra Skeptics meet on the last Friday of every month, next meeting March 27, in the Forest Room of the Cellar Bar at University House. Inquiries, phone 249-4590. What do scientists, journalists, and magicians have in common? They are all on the lookout for sleight of hand. They are all skeptics. It's funny how often people ask you whether being a skeptic makes life boring, mused David Vernon, a member of Canberra Skeptics and editor of the group's newsletter, Argos. Really, it's quite the opposite. Having an inquiring mind which refuses to accept claims on face value makes life all the more interesting. Mysticism is far duller than reality. Canberra Skeptics was formed in 1984 by a philosopher from the Australian University, William Gray. The pivotal aim of the group is to investigate claims of paranormal phenomena and pseudosciences, and to encourage people to question what cannot be proved. For the first few years, the group was run by Australian National University academics, but has since expanded to involve people from a wide range of backgrounds and occupations, including scientists, public servants, journalists, magicians, and retired people. Some have been attracted to the group as they attempt to understand and reason with a relative or friend who has become obsessed with mystic cults or the paranormal. To say that we do not believe anything that cannot be explained by science is a rather simplistic assessment of the group, said Colin Groves, a biological anthropologist and veteran member of the group. Some things cannot be tested, like the existence of God. But where pseudoscience robs people not only of money but of their capacity to think, we feel duty-bound to intervene and see that reason and fact is at least put forward as a balance. David Vernon became a member of Canberra Skeptics in his final year of high school. Marked down in a biology exam for questioning the beliefs of his creationist schoolmaster, David contacted the group, showed them his work, and asked them to represent his case to the school board. David's C was promptly upgraded to an A, and some behind-the-scenes measures were taken to modify the offending master's teaching style. Creationism, where it is used to cloud the facts of history, science, biology, and anthropology in education, is a particular concern to the Canberra Skeptics. Other key targets are business people who claim to be psychics, astrologers, numerologists, clairvoyants, and practitioners of non-scientific alternative medicine. There is a huge variety of pseudoscientists and people who make claims of paranormal phenomena, Colin explained. But we are a small self-funded organisation and have to set priorities. Essentially, we concentrate on topics that we know a lot about through our work and study, and on people whose claims may put others in danger. Where possible, the skeptics convince their targets to be publicly tested under controlled conditions. The most recent such investigation involved a member of the Canberra Society of Organic Growers, who was also an exponent of what is known as moon planting in accordance with astrological principles. According to the organic grower, certain times on certain days are positive for planting, other times are not, and the difference may only be a matter of minutes. Over a month, the Canberra Skeptics were guided by the moon planters to sow a crop of radishes. As a control, the skeptics planted their own crop at random times, but under the same conditions. The result of the experiment gave a similar success rate for each crop. Then there was the investigation of the marikari, a healing, life-generating energy said to be possessed by a chosen few. The experiment, which the skeptics themselves say was not conducted under strict clinical procedure, tested the power of the marikari light over a seeding at the CSIRO. And CSIRO is the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation. A month after the experiment, the Marikari Groups was confidently advertising that its powers had been witnessed by the Australian skeptics and shown to have an effect. What the Marikari didn't publicise was that where the control seed flourished into a healthy plant, the poor little creature dosed up on divine light had withered away. Not one of the people whose powers or belief have been tested and failed has actually admitted that they may be wrong, said Colin. Apart from its program of public testing, the skeptics also see themselves as having a responsibility for public education. They produce and distribute a bi-monthly newsletter, participate in community events, and air their concerns through the media. The group also published in 1989 its own manual of skepticism, which sets out the case for reason and dissembles, in alphabetical order, 36 theories of pseudoscience. The sparsely presented, sparsely entitled publication Skeptical examines pseudosciences from aromatherapy to water divining and asserts that, however they may have been inducted, through dissatisfaction with science, a personal search, or sheer loneliness, the followers of pseudoscience risk being misled, divorced from reality, and most likely parted from their money by charlatans. And a few years earlier, also in the Canberra Times, on the 17th of June 1989, I've come across a review of the very booklet mentioned, Skeptical. Skeptical, edited by Don Laycock, David Vernon, Colin Groves, and Simon Brown. 79 pages, $5.50 plus $1.50 postage. Reviewer, Peter Bowler. Gentle dose of doubt. In 18th century Yorkshire, it was believed that the best way to cure a toothache was to carry in the pocket a tooth from the corpse of the opposite sex. This may seem absurd today, but it is only a small step from the tooth carriers of York to the New Age crystal carriers, whose enthusiasms are now taken seriously enough for them to attract substantial coverage in the mass media. Harmless fantasizing, many of us would say, but blind faith in a comforting metaphysic ultimately leads to the blind fanaticism of the Inquisition and the Jihad. The auto de fe was literally an act of faith. And a quick look online, because I hadn't heard this expression before. Auto de fe, Portuguese, act of faith, and it involves the Spanish Inquisition. The existence of a group called the Canberra Skeptics, whose aim it is to gently question the faddish fantasies of our time, is therefore reassuring. Amid all the hullabaloo of the true believers, the still, small voice of reason can be heard, emanating, no matter how faintly, from at least one group in our society. I say gently, because the skeptics have tended to go about their quizzical business with goodwill and a sense of humour. Not for them the hurtful aggression of Bradlaugh, and I didn't know this, Charles Bradlaugh was an English political activist and atheist, or the crusading zeal of Russell. They entertain each other with magic tricks, issue spoof predictions of the future, and make only occasional appearances on public platforms to expose the delusions of the credulous. Very sportingly, they seem to have followed a policy of exempting the field of religious belief from their skeptical surveillance. This is reflected in the content of the present book, which is essentially a ready reference guide to 36 of the major non-religious faiths of our day, from aliens to water divining. It has been written and published by several members of the Canberra Skeptics and is available by mail order direct from them at PO Box 120, Campbell 2601. Though it is, in this sense, an amateur production, there is nothing amateurish about its physical presentation. The stark black cover nicely sets off the intellectual, uncompromising nature of the contents. There is no padding and no pretension. At the price, it is good value by any standard. Among the authors, the late Don Laycock is worthy of special mention. His contribution on the tarot is a model of what such an analysis should be: authoritative, informative, and up-to-date. Not all the other contributions come up to this standard. Some are disappointingly short, and many leave the reader wishing that the subject had been explored in greater depth, even given the general constraints of the book's overall format. The article on Scientology, for example, might have gone just a little further and drawn some interesting comparisons between Dianetics and Freudian psychoanalysis, which had remarkably similar tenets and which was at the height of its popularity in the United States when Dianetics first saw the light of day in the May 1950 issue of Astounding Science Fiction. Similarly, the article on reincarnation would have been more convincing on its statistical rejection of prior living. The population 200 years ago was 1/6 its present size. Therefore, 200 years ago, most of us couldn't have been anybody. If it had taken the extra step of exploring the statistical implications of staggered reincarnation, and so on. In this respect, Skeptical falls short of the achievement of such classics as Rawcliffe's Illusions and Delusions of the Supernatural and Occult. On the other hand, it covers a greater range of fallacies, it is up to the minute in its subject matter, and for readers who want a more detailed treatment, it gives useful references for further reading. Skeptical is a generous source of that innocent joy and wonderment which all of us derive from the spectacle of others making complete fools of themselves. It is also a book that could be of real use to young people of an impressionable age. Buy it for your older kids. A dose of skepticism may be just what they need to arm them against the seductive sophistries of adult life. And if they put it under the pillow at night, it will cure their toothache. Peter Bowler is the author of several books on language history and child development. And I remember having a copy of that book myself. Way back in, heavens above, when would it have been? The late 80s? Early 90s? Well, this report comes from mid-1989, so I guess I had it around about 1990, 1991? Maybe even in 1989. So there we are, a couple of references to work done by the Canberra Skeptics decades ago. And don't forget, you can discover all sorts of things when you look at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. One thing leads to another. One search can find many things which are a surprise. Because, of course, when you visit Trove, you never know what you might find.
This is Adrienne Hill from Calgary, here to correct a mistake many of you may have noticed when I read last week's newsletter. Richard usually catches these mistakes I make. He makes me laugh, I giggle, then I re-record, and all is good. Last week, however, we both missed it, and I'm guessing that Richard's long flight to the US might have had something to do with it. But listener and friend Leonard Trammell notified me of my mistake. The mistake was made when reading about the Therapeutic Goods Administration, or TGA, issuing 20 infringement notices to Mode Medical, which is trading as what I called DRIP 4 Australia. I'm kind of thinking my math teacher / Roman numeral part of my brain overrode my medical terminology part of the brain. It should have been called DRIP IV Australia. Until my next mistake, this is Adrienne Hill.
Thank you for listening to episode 750 of the Skeptic Zone podcast. And there wouldn't be an episode 750 if it wasn't for those great people out there in the audience who subscribe at Patreon or PayPal, and you can do that at skepticzone.tv, because it's their contributions, and if you're listening, your contributions, that keep the show on the road. Thank you very much. And if you want to join that merry band of people who help the Skeptic Zone, head to skepticzone.tv and do the rest. $5 a month or $10 a month, it's all it takes to keep the show going. Coming up on next week's episode, Adrienne Hill returns with her segment on wiki projects, and this time she'll be looking at alternative medicine, the top pages on Wikipedia for AltMed. We have the Australian Skeptics newsletter once again, and the Trove segment will look at fake cures. Fake cures. Now, I hope to see Susan Gerbic in person this week, so maybe we'll get another interview or catch up with her, and also with my friend Dr. Eugenie Scott, who appeared on the Skeptic Zone a couple of months back when we were discussing Ancient Apocalypse. But for this week, from episode 750, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the Bay Area, San Francisco. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.